Today on Crazed Performance Repair, we are going to go over some knowledge and replacement of some sway bar end links. I'm going to talk about different types of sway bar end links. I'm going to talk about the different styles, kinds, and also the different ways of removing them. They have several different techniques to them. They have several different options for removal. There's a lot of things going on with sway bar end links that people don't even realize exist. So we'll go ahead and get over that after I pull the wheels. So the sway bar links we are going to be doing on this vehicle are a Nissan Rogue sway bar link, and they're the set of the fronts. They're right here. They are just the double, it's like a tie rod end almost, and I'll show you that in a second. But I want to cover a couple different styles of sway bar links first. So this style here, which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute, that's one type of sway bar link. There's also the bushing style sway bar links, and this is also very common. Usually you'll see this in the modern stuff more in the rears than in the fronts, kind of, sort of. But the older mid-90s GMs specifically, they use this heavily in their cars in the front. And basically what it is it's a very long bolt, and then I don't have an actual one here. I just have some parts that are sitting in my bin that I can make it look like one of them or simulate one of them. But basically what you'll have is you'll have a very long bolt. You'll put a washer down on the bolt. Then you put this guy, which is a sway bar bushing, down on that. Then you have the sway bar itself or the control arm it'll go through. And then you have another bushing and then another washer. And then on top of that washer is a spacer to take up the in-between gap. And then the same thing to either the control arm or the sway bar. And those are pretty basic, pretty simple, probably the easiest, best ones to replace, because if you just break the thing, if it's rusty for instance, or if it's already broken, it's going to be fairly easy to pull off of there. That's why I don't have an actual one here, and I'm not talking about it while I have one of those here, because those ones are pretty easy and pretty straightforward to install. Those are by far my favorite for installation and removal because they are so simple. Now another type of sway bar link, which is what we have here, you can see this guy. This guy's kind of goofy. It's a little bit different than the typical. They're normally not all curved crazy like this to go around, for instance, this little baby axle. I mean, geez, the thing's the size of my thumb. But anyway, so they're not typically curved and crazy like this. This is a Nissan Rogue, and the reason that it's curved like that is just for the axle. But normally they're straight. Now this style of sway bar link has a bushing on each end with a bolt going through it. This is the style that is least likely to fail. However, when they do fail, you could have this bolt being seized up inside the bushing here, and that becomes one heck of a problem to deal with. But this Nissan, I noticed the bolt size on this car is actually really large, so I'm willing to bet that even if that bolt was a problem, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Plus, a guy could, if he had to, cut this thing right here. Just go ahead and slice through all of it, take it off, and then replace the bolt with a new bolt. Since it's a bolt and a nut, it would not be a big deal. Now, if that bolt had threaded into something, like say the sway bar for instance, which I have never seen, so I highly doubt you run into that situation, then you could have an issue on your hands because you wouldn't be able to thread or, turn the bolt because it's stuck in the bushing without tearing the bushing, and it'll create all kinds of nightmares. But this is one style, and this is probably the most reliable style as far as failure rate goes. Now some will have a style like this on one end, and then the style that I was just talking about where it's got the straight bushing on the other end. So say for instance this control arm was in line with that, you might have this on this end, and then the bolt with the bushing combo will come through the control arm and actually hook up that way. I've seen that on a couple of vehicles. I have no idea what vehicles they were. It's been a while since I've seen those, but I know they exist. Now, there is another kind of style that they kind of combine and mix all these, but instead of this style socket, it'll be like the ball joint style, like the one I'm about to show you in the next little clip here. And they'll have that on one end, and then they'll have the other style on the other end, and they just kind of mix and match and make these things all kinds of crazy. I have also seen the ball and socket style, where a ball and socket thing But instead of being just a stud like this, it actually is like really long like that, and then you'll have the bushing combo on this end of it. And wait, it'll be like this. There we go. So it'd be like that. So that way you can bolt this onto the sway bar or the control arm or whatever this has to go to, and then this end would have a bushing, or possibly another one of these. I've seen those before on the other end where it goes to the other end of obviously the sway bar or the control arm. So a few different styles. They make lots of different sway bars. But enough of that. I'm going to go over this one last one, and then we'll get to replacing it, since this is actually the one I'm putting in. Now, this sway bar link is way overbuilt. I'm actually quite impressed. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys and throw a free ad for these guys out there. The customer actually sent me this, and he purchased it on Rock Auto, which is a very affordable site, so I'll throw an ad for them too. They've probably got the best prices for parts. So TTX, Terrain Tough Extreme. So it's an interesting looking box. I mean, I guess, there you go. So it's interesting, that's for sure. It's very simple, I like it, and it's by Mevotech. So I've dealt with a lot of Mevotech products, and I'm usually pretty impressed with their products. The sway bars that are on the car right now are Mevotech, but they were purchased on Amazon, and I believe they were the cheapest version of the Mevotechs, and I'm not happy with those. So if you go Mevotech, however you pronounce it, if you go with those guys, be sure to get their higher grade stuff, because their higher grade stuff, I mean, like this one in particular, this thing looks like it could belong on a Humvee or something. I mean, it looks like it could be on a military vehicle or a semi-truck. This thing is way overbuilt for this puny little Nissan Rogue. So we'll do a comparison next to the other one, but I want to note a couple of things. So these sway bar links, you can see there is a collar here. There is no deal on the end of this. Now, this is where the sway bar links are going to get a bit more complex, because some sway bar links will actually have a hex head on this end, a very small hex head. If you have those sway bar links and you live in a rusty environment like the Rust Belt here in Minnesota, I'm sorry, it's going to suck for you. I mean, there's nothing you're going to be able to do. It's going to be a challenge to get the thing loose. Now, there are a few things. I've had tips in the past on this where I just spit it out during another video where I happen to be replacing these. But basically, all you can do is grab a hold of this end of it with a vice grip and zing that end off with the impact. I don't even bother putting anything on this end. So the style with the hex on the outside, total waste of time. And this one, in fact, is also one of those where it's kind of a waste of time, but you can try it if you want. But I've had a little more success with these. Now this one, it has an Allen wrench socket right there. So I don't know why, but for some reason those have a little bit better chance of getting it off of there by putting an Allen in there. But it's still not a very good chance. And honestly, if I was to do anything, you see there's a little flat spot here. And that flat spot is where a guy would bite down on it with a vice grip if you had the opportunity to do so. So if it's in the right position, great, bite down with it with a vice grip, be done with it. Installing it, you can definitely use either one of the hex or this Allen style. Installing is no problem. It's just once it gets rusty, then it becomes an issue. So another thing, grease zerks, be sure you position these in a position that's helpful. And then if you look at this one, there's an indexing going on here. So we have one of these is at a goofy angle compared to the other one. So what I need to do now is I need to verify, because if they were ordered correctly, there would be a right or a left if a vehicle actually had a right or a left. So I'm going to check the part numbers, and they are different. So I got a 3853 and a 3852 for the last section of digits on there. Overbuilt for durability. Yeah, no kidding. Holy cow. They say it right on the package. That's interesting. So I have two part numbers, so I need to figure out which one's left, which one's right. So my process of doing that is basically just a comparison at the vehicle. So obviously this thing is going to fit this way. However, you want to pay attention to these grease zerks. Would you be able to access the grease zerks if they were on the other side? So if I were to take this guy and put it this way, it would not fit. That doesn't, yeah. So the thing ends up backwards, obviously, because the bolts are going the wrong direction. This one's coming this way, that one's going that way, so that does not work. I could do it this way, and then the grease zerks are in the right position, and the bolts are going in the right position. So I believe this is the correct side. We're going to go look at the other side to see and verify that that is the case. Alright, we have the same sway bar link over on this side. Now, if I were to put it like this, not only does this thing sit kittywampus, so this is straight lined up with this one, but the one down here is at a crazy angle compared to the one that's over here. So we know for a fact this one will not fit. Not only that, but the grease zerks are going towards the inside here. So they're going towards all the suspension and related components over here. So that would make it hard to get a grease gun in there to actually grease this sway bar link. So we know for a fact this one goes on the other side. So that's exactly where I'm going to put it. So I'm going to set this guy right here, and then I will compare the other one, make sure that one fits the other side, and we will get started with replacing sway bar links. Alright, so lucky for me, this sway bar link has the actual hex on this side. That is a good design because it makes it very easy for me to throw a wrench on there just like that. And so now that I have a wrench on there, if I had the room, I could take an impact gun and zing this nut off. But since I don't have the room for this nut, I'll be able to do it up there, but I don't have the room for this nut. So what I need to do is break out the good old ratchet and just manually take it loose. But because it has this, it should be nice and easy. And just like that, we have the nut off of this thing. Now, another thing to note is this particular sway bar link has what are called locking nylon nuts. And if you have these, they're good and bad. So the good thing is that nylon that's in there will seal off the threads and help prevent it from rusting in this area, so long as this end is sealed off. So if you have that style and you want to prevent it from rusting altogether, the best thing to do is put some Loctite on this side so that the Loctite creates a sealer in the back here, and then this nylon nut will automatically seal the other side and you don't have to Loctite it. But if you have to take one of these off and you're extremely rusty and it looks terrible, you might want to just heat this nut up a little bit, because if you heat it up a little bit, that nylon gets soft. It helps make it come loose a little bit easier. Now this one here, since I have access to it, I can just go ahead and use the impact gun to remove this end. Alright, so installation of the sway bar link. We have, obviously, a bag of parts. This comes in the box of pretty much any sway bar link. It's going to come with extra parts that you either need to use or may use or whatever. Sometimes they send all kinds of extra stuff that you don't need to use. Now this one, it comes with 2 grease zerks. They're just a straight style grease zerk. Not a big deal. That's what we're going to go ahead and put in. We have plenty of room to work with, so we have no issues with grease zerk interference. It also came with these little caps. Now these are pretty jank, and I would never use them. But if you wanted to remove the grease zerk, you could take this guy and put it in there like that. But, I mean, honestly, that's not going to stay in there. It's kind of silly. So, a couple of things. One is the nuts again. We're going to talk about those because there is a few different style of nut. Pretty much all sway bar links are going to come with some sort of locking nuts. Now, some of them will come with the they'll have like teeth on this flat surface. So right here there will be some teeth that will bite in. Those are pretty nice, but they do allow the thing to rust pretty badly. Now, some of them will have this end where it's squeezed. Alright, so I went and dug through my nut and bolt bin. See if you guys can see this, but if you look this way, this area is much smaller than this area. So I don't know how well you can see that, but it's definitely not a circle. Go ahead and do this. So you can see it's an oval shape. Now if you end up with this style of nut, those can be a huge problem putting on, because what will happen is it'll get down the length of this as it's threading on there, right? And as soon as it starts getting to that locking section, that squeeze section, it'll get so tight that this joint will spin and you'll be forced to hold this. Now normally new sway bar links like this, you can just put this in and use an impact and it'll zip it right in. The side that I can't get an impact on, I may or may not have to hold this slightly, but I guess we'll find out. Now this style of nut is the nylon locking nut. Now I mentioned heating it up to remove it. You could, if you really felt a need to, but usually it's not necessary, heat up the stud just a little bit. Don't get crazy. You'll burn the rubber, you'll wreck the grease, you'll wreck the nylon that's inside here. Just a little bit, and it'll make this go on a little bit easier, or you could even heat up the nut a little bit. again, you don't get crazy. You just need to warm it up a little. I'm going to go ahead and thread the grease zerks in here, and then we're going to get this thing installed, and we'll go ahead and grease it, and I'll show you a couple things with greasing it. Okay, so it has started to spin this a little bit, and spin the shaft here, but it does tighten as I'm doing it. But I'm just going to go ahead and throw a wrench on here, just for good measure. Now this one here, I'm just going to go ahead and throw an impact on, and the impact is not letting it go down, so we're going to use the wrench on this one as well. Alright, so greasing the joints here. Now this goes the same for pretty much any kind of ball joint, tie rod end, whatever, but when you grease these things, I'm going to go ahead and do this one first. So what you want to do when you grease these things is you want to watch this boot here, this bellows right here, and you want to watch for it to start to swell. But it's much easier to see in person, I would imagine, than it is on the camera. So let's go ahead and just keep watching, and this thing will swell up. If the joint starts to leak where your grease fitting is, just move the thing around. You can see how it's swelling. There it is. And in fact, look at that. We have a little release right here. So that's a nice little feature that I'm not used to seeing. That's a pressure release. And basically, if you get too much in here, I'll go ahead and push down on this. It starts oozing out a whole bunch. So that's also going to let the air out, maybe. Let's see here. No, there's my grease though. So there you have it. That's a greased joint. Now I always wipe these things clean before I put the lid back on. So if the grease zerk you're doing does have one of these little caps, you want to be sure to put that little cap back on when you're done, because that'll actually keep it from rusting and having problems later. It's kind of a nice little feature if they give you those caps. It's not needed, but it is nice, so be sure to put that on if you have it. Now, I want to comment one more thing before we go here, because this sway bar, it lines up as far as physically in line with the components, so it'll function perfectly fine. But I did notice something that I'm not a fan of, and that's the position of the grease zerks. Remember how I mentioned earlier the suspension facing the wrong way for the grease zerk because it's hard to get a grease gun in there? You don't have to grease them very often, oil change or whatever, whenever you get a chance. But the fact of the matter is, it's much nicer to have the grease zerk here. Well, this one has the grease zerk on the wrong side. So this one's going to kind of suck to grease later on. But again, it's not the end of the world, no big deal. It's just something I noticed and wanted to point out. So there you have it, a little install on some sway bar links. If you guys like these little tips, these little tricks, be sure to hit a like, be sure to share and subscribe, because I bring these tips all the time. Whenever I get an opportunity to do a little tech tip or maybe a little 101 like this, I will certainly do it if I get more likes and more info comments. Let me know. Let me know in the comments below. With that, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.